Call the City Council adjourned meeting for Monday, September 17th, 2007 to order. We'll begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. Roll call, Tracy?
Arbogast.
Here.
Garnos.
Here.
Gisselbeck.
Here.
Heller.
Here.
Meisenheimer.
Here.
Solberg. Solom. Walder is absent. Wilkins. And York.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, Tracy. First item on the agenda is the approval of minutes of the City Council meeting held on September 4th, 2007. Is there a motion, please? So moved by Alderman Solberg. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Alderwoman York. Any additions or corrections? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Agenda item number 2 is an application for transfer of a retail on-off sale malt beverage license from Lacey Joe Junso, which was inactive, 609 8th Street Northeast, to Don and Cheryl Meyer of Gas and Goodies, 152 4th Street Northeast, and that we'll begin with a public hearing. And is there anyone here to speak to the issue? Don, I see you're out in the audience. Do you have anything you'd like to say about it, or no? Okay. Everything seems to be in order in that, and if not, then I'll close the public hearing and request council action for the approval. Is there a motion? So moved by Alderman Solberg. Is there a second?
I'll second that.
Seconded by Alderwoman Arbogast. Any questions, discussion?
I have one. Is it, I don't think these folks have had beer and wine license before, have they?
That's correct.
Now, is it rule of thumb that convenience stores are eligible to have?
I believe what they're doing, Stan, if you can correct me on this, they went before the Board of Adjustment?
Yeah,
And for a casino?
yeah, I guess the way I'd answer that, Mayor, and for Gordon, is that under Watertown zoning ordinance, there is no location that is preordained or authorized to have malt beverage or any kind of liquor license issued at a particular legal description. You first have to go to the Board of Adjustment and ask the question, is this a suitable location for a liquor license to be issued? So you have to first be granted a special exception to engage in that privilege, and then you come before the council once you've been granted special exception by the Board of Adjustment to ask that the license be issued to that location.
Was there a casino there then?
No, I don't believe there's ever, I confess I don't know the history of the property, but I don't think there ever has been.
No, there hasn't.
Will this be separated the same as the rest of them, like the Cowboy Store and Freedom Station?
Maybe you might want to step up here, Don, and
Hi,
will
I'm
there
Don.
be a wall separating?
Yes, there's a wall separating. It's like most of the casinos in town, there is a wall, separate door, entrance to the inside and the outside.
So
With
there
the-
is a casino there.
There's no casino there now. There will be that's what we're applying for. But there's a casino in every convenience store at Watertown, This won't be the only one in town. I mean, they all have a casino.
Are you saying this is going to be a new casino license? Because we haven't granted any of those for a long, long time.
No, this is
Is this this is just a
This is a
transfer?
transfer, yes.
Just so everybody understands, because every time a new one opens up,
Oh,
somebody
sure.
said, I thought you decided not to issue
No.
anymore.
This is-
Which we have, but they keep moving around.
right. They're just moving around, yeah.
Any other questions? If not, then all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Don. Item number 3 is the 2008 Urban Renewal Assessment Roll, and I'll begin with the public hearing. And Tracy, would you like to speak to that, please?
Yes, this is a resolution that comes before the council each year at this time to levy the assessments for the Urban Renewal District, which is primarily the uptown area. Goes from 4th Street east to 3rd Street west, and then from 1st Avenue north to 1st Avenue south. That's the district that this encompasses. And you have a list in your packet of the actual assessment roll, the property owners, and the amount assessed to each property owner. If you have any questions, I'd certainly be happy to try to answer those.
If not, Jerome, you wish to speak to the council on the assessment roll?
Yeah, I think.
Sure. Why don't you come up here to the mic there and just identify yourself and then,
I'm Jerome Hyder, and I think it's just a bunch of waste of money to the assessment. I'm down here, and I don't even run a business, and I'm getting assessed for it. And every year it keeps going up. And I talked to Bill Riefenberger about it, and he thinks it's the biggest bunch of hogwash you ever seen. Wasting money is what he told me.
anything else, Jerome?
No.
Okay,
And
thank
I'd
you.
like to get out of it if I can. If nobody else wants in, they can stay in, but I want out.
I think Stan and I explained to you last year what you needed to do to get yourself removed from the Urban Renewal Board. Isn't that correct, Stanton?
Yeah, as I mentioned last year, whenever the question was first put to me, some years ago, the council, as they're authorized to do under state statute, delegated the urban renewal powers that are carved out under state law to a separate urban renewal board. So among the powers that board has is the ability to define what its district is. So you're right, Mayor. Jerome's path is to go ask the Urban Renewal Board, please redefine your district boundaries and get me out of it. And you know, I hope that if he hasn't asked that question, he will, because it sounds like he wants out.
Okay, thank you, Stanton. That's
Because
what
I
you,
was talking to Riefenberger, and he was supposed to let us know when that was coming up again to be revoted on, so.
maybe tomorrow, Jerome, you should go and contact him and see when that's gonna happen, so.
And if Bill has already kind of given that his blessing, that's your first step because he's the chairman of that board.
Yeah.
So-
So,
Okay, thank you, Jerome. Anyone else to speak to the issue? If not, then I'll close the public hearing and go to council action for the approval of the urban renewal assessment roll, resolution number 07-49. Is there a motion, please? Motion by Alderman Giselbeck, seconded by Alderman Garnus. Any discussion, questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 4 is vacation of a portion of a stormwater easement in Lot 2 of the Arnold Second Edition. And we'll begin with the public hearing. And Rick, I'll call on you first.
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening, ladies and gentlemen of the City Council. This is a vacation of a portion of a stormwater easement in Lot 2 of Arnold Second Edition, the location of which is shown on, this is shown on the screen right now, and it's also, this map has been included in your packet. Just some, for reference, this curved road here is South Lake Drive. You can see the cursor going from north to south, upper to lower portions of the screen right now. Lake Compesca, of course, on the left. The South Water Tower in the lower portion where you can see the hand moving right now. Just to give you a frame of reference, the site we're talking about is located right here. Your petitioners are Dennis Arnold and Robert Arnold, the owners of the properties involved. Darwin Brinkman is their consultant surveyor. This dates back to a plat action that occurred on Arnold Second Edition back in September 3rd of 2003. And then on the plat and in the letter of assurance, there was a need, and the letter of assurance and the plat addressed the need for drainage easements on properties, lots 2 and 3. This is just one of those things that kind of fell through the system, and really no harm, no foul, because we found a good solution to it, and that's what we're talking about today. The Plan Commission is, just for your information, has taken this issue up on August 23rd and recommends the approval of this vacation, along with the requirement that, or the suggestion that the City Council require a dedication of a stormwater easement in the northwest corner of Lot 3, equivalent in size to that portion that we're vacating. And I will show you a section here that will maybe help define what we're looking at. There's a lot of lines on this drawing, and the colors will help you. But this is Lot 2. If you can see the cursor right here, and maybe I should have some color on this, but it won't help the viewers in the audience at home. But for here, you can see the 2. Lot 1 and Lot 3 below. You can see a faint outline right here, And you can see, and that's the outline of the approximate location of construction that has occurred on lots, actually 3 and 2. The colors that you see there are the location, as we've concluded with some help from Ardell Lawson, is the area that is necessary to detain some stormwater from the lots that were platted and actually unplatted lots to the west as well. The elevation there is around elevation 1744. The walkout basement of this home that was been constructed and it is under construction is at 1748, so we feel confident that there will not be an issue there. The area that we're trading in this vacation is this corner down here. If you can see, it's in the south east corner of lot 2. You can see that that's not encumbered, and the natural grade just doesn't provide for, without some manipulation and grading itself, the storage that's necessary. Whereas there's more of a natural storage area in the northwest corner of lot 3, and that is where, in fact, the trade is occurring. All of lots 1 and 2 are currently encumbered with a drainage easement, and we are suggesting, and Sarah has photograph, she has, if I can find it here. Graphically attempted to represent in the light blue is the area that I just spoke to you. Naturally, the contour of the ground provides for the drainage and the storage in the light blue hatches. You can see lots 1 and 2 represented here, fully encumbered by the drainage easement. You can see lot 2 here is where we're suggesting that the vacation of the drainage easement occur, and in trade get an easement on lot 3 right in this location. And we have in hand a signed easement to that effect. And with that, I don't know that any more discussion is necessary. This comes with the recommendation of the Plan Commission and your city staff. So I will conclude my comments there and suggest that you accept the vacation.
Thank you, Rick. Is there anyone else in the audience that'd like to speak to the issue? If not, then I'll close the public hearing and go to council action. Is there a motion then for the approval of Resolution 07-48?
So approved.
So approved by Alderman Garnos. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Solom. Any questions, discussion? If not, all in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Rick. Item number 5 is the 2008 city budget, ordinance number 07-26. Tracy, would you do the second reading?
Thank you, Mayor. The proposed ordinance number 07-26 is included in your agenda packet. It has not changed since first reading, so I won't really spend any time reviewing it at this time, but if you do have questions, I'll try to answer those.
Okay. If not, then before I go to council action, I'd like to recognize Alderman George Heller.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, some of my more articulate colleagues have told me that my verbal communication skills are pretty bad. And I have to agree because I was trained to listen and not talk. But I have something to say to them, even though they could care less what I have to say, because I think their minds are made up and closed on this subject. Talk about tilting at windmills. I'm going to move in a few minutes that we take the proposed money for the campground expansion from the 2008 and 2009 CIP budget and move it to the 2010 and 2011 CIP budget. And I'm going to do that for a couple of reasons that I believe are pretty valid. I believe this money, which is approximately $250,000 to expand the campground by 25 pads, can be put to better use if only as a savings for the taxpayers. How can we justify spending that kind of money for an additional 25 pads that will be used 32 days out of the year? Just because some people want to camp there, maybe we should okay expanding it by 100 or more pads so that everyone can be accommodated. That's pretty silly, isn't it? We all know, and I hope understand that sales tax money is probably going to be in short supply this year and maybe next. Will the city go broke if we put this into the CIP budget? Absolutely not. But doesn't spending $250,000 for something like this mean anything to anybody anymore? The citizens who oppose this project have some very valid reasons for doing so, in my opinion, and if you should choose to put this money into the Parks Department budget at any time, the Park Department should at least address those ideas by those who oppose this project prior to any bid letting for this project. On the other hand, if we proceed to move this money into the budget down the road, are we creating any hardships for anyone? It seems to me under the circumstances that, to my way of thinking, is our best course of action. So I would urge each of you to use some good old common sense tonight and act as diligent keepers of the pocketbook for all the citizens of Watertown who have to pay the bills, and vote yea on my motion, which is hereby made to move this money for expanding the campground from the 2008-2009 budget to the 2010 and 2011 CIP budget. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and the council for your time.
Alderman Heller, then you made a motion then, is that correct?
I certainly did.
Okay, is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Solom. Any further questions, discussion?
I just, if I could, Mr. Mayor,
Yes.
forgive me for interrupting, but just as a point of protocol, it probably would have been better to get the budget as a motion on the floor to approve the 2008 fiscal year budget, and then have George move to amend that 2008 budget by what he just did. So if you don't mind, if you'd, just for the sake of clarity, if you'd withdraw that and then introduce the 2008 budget as a motion on the floor and then amend it.
I don't understand that, but I guess I'll go along with it. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Stan. Thank you, Alderman Heller. That's okay with you, Alderman Solom? Okay.
I will then move to approve the budget.
Okay, motion by Alderman Garnels to approve the budget. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Solberg. Now, any further discussion or questions?
Now I'd like to propose my motion.
No, so there's been an amendment. Is that correct, Stanton?
No, there's a motion on the floor that I think George is about to make an amendment to.
I'd move that we remove the 2007, 2008 money from the Park Board budget and move it to the 2010, 2011 CIP budget.
Thank you. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Solom. Now, any discussion, questions?
I have one
Yes.
question. George, if we were to leave it in the budget, would, say, 6 months give us enough time to hash over everything? Being it is in the budget, but it won't be spent until next spring, until we do bidding process and then turning the earth and making the pads. I was just wondering if we couldn't leave it in the budget and then look over all the options that's out there and then go forward next summer if we all agree that it is a good idea, or kill it at that time if we think it's a bad idea.
I don't know the answer to that, Dennis. Roger is here, and I don't know what the timetable is for all of that. But the problem I have is that the Park Board went ahead and approved asking for the money from the city without a whole lot of input from the public, and that's where I would hope that we, either if it's 6 months down the road or a year or 2 years down the road, I hope that happens and the Park Board takes all of the input from all of the people in the city rather than just a few.
I think that, if I may speak to the
Yes.
issue, that the people that we are going to help are the ones with trailers and the ones with campers and stuff like that. And they're not the ones with the cabins or with the houses out there. But we are going to help a lot of the people in Watertown that would have campers that can, and we would keep them in Watertown rather than send them to Pickerel Lake or to Oakwood or wherever. If we've got camping spots here, why, they'll stay here, especially with the price of gas.
Could we hear from Roger on on this, where we've been and what your committee has proposed?
Well, in terms of the history of it, I guess, it goes way back to there is a state law that limits municipalities from expanding or building new campgrounds. That's been on the books for years and years. We had people that would come to our public input meeting every year during budget time and ask us to expand the campground, and our pat response was always, our hands are tied, there's a state law that doesn't allow it. But recently, the city of Aberdeen got the legislature to change the law and allow municipalities to expand or create new campgrounds with written permission from any licensed campground within a 15-mile radius of the site where the municipality wants to expand. And so because of that change, then currently state law would allow us to do that. Originally, when we contacted, at that time, the one known licensed campground within a 15-mile radius, we were not given written permission to expand, and therefore, again, for several years, the option wasn't even before us. But recently, that campground owner and one other one have chosen to give us permission. We requested the funds for the 07-08 budget, and that was moved back a year ago to 08 and 09, and so that's kind of how we got to where we are today. The Park and Rec Board, included it in their CIP request to the council. On August 6th, the council approved the CIP plan. Obviously, the CIP plan is a part of the budget process, so that's why we're discussing it tonight in the second reading.
Roger, how much information has the public been given on this so that if they wanted to comment on it, when could they? Have they been given adequate notice and things like that?
Well, I guess it depends on what you define adequate notice. I know on August 6th, Tracy did quite a bit of publicity on the fact that he wanted the public to come to the CIP input meetings. If you recall, I don't believe there was a single person showed up for any of the CIP, even the $1 million projects. I know Mr. Heller called for public input, in a meeting 2 weeks ago to try and get input, both pro and con. And, during that 2-week period, I received 7 phone calls from individuals, both for and against the project. 5 happened to express support for the expansion, 2 expressed non-support. So I don't know, as council people, if you've all received, similar comments and input. I guess the subject is not new. Like I said, it was moved back a year ago, and in both CIP approvals, it was never brought up as an issue or a problem. So I think the public's aware of what the plan is.
Thank you. Stanton, can if I want to grant the public an opportunity to speak, can I do that?
Absolutely. There's a motion on the floor if they want to speak to it. They
Okay, is there anyone in the audience that would to speak to this amendment motion?
Yes, I would. I'm Maylu Austin, and I've been a citizen of Watertown for 46 years. I would just like to address all of you. Thank you, Mayor Fox and council people, for letting me speak. I feel a little like Al Gore and his global warming, that it's a little late and maybe the deal's done. But I would like to say I read the paper every day. I didn't know anything about this until 2 weeks ago. A lot of people in Watertown, I don't think, are aware of this situation. But we have a group here this evening who are in support of George's motion or his amendment. We have several concerns. Our city fathers and mothers chose to dedicate land on Lake Campesca, which is our jewel in Watertown, one of our best assets, for the public to use as a park. Now, I understand that some people have trailers, some people have cabins, some people don't have anything, and that's what the park is for. I think that at this time it wouldn't be possible to acquire any more land on Lake Kempesca. So what we have to preserve. And we need green area. We don't need to have use for every piece of property that we can just look at it. Our concern is that the population of Watertown is growing and we aren't getting any more parks. So we can't acquire any more green space. And another concern is the expense of the project and the ongoing expense of the maintenance of the project and how it impinges on the rest of the park. And my biggest issue is that the park is for all the citizens of our community. Once the land is committed to a campsite, you're not going to get it back. And if the funding is delayed, perhaps then people will be, from the general public, will be able to give their input on what they really want developed on that property out there. So I would encourage you to vote for this amendment to this. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Anyone else that'd like to speak?
Your Honor.
We have one coming up.
Oh, excuse me.
Hello, Dennis Murphy, Watertown Park Board. I'd like to just address some of the questions that were brought to you and some of the reasons we felt that expanding the campground at this time would be a good idea. And well, let me address the green space first of all. The campground isn't going to affect I wish I had my letters here. I'm a little nervous. I'm not used to public speaking. But I guess I'm just lost here.
That's okay, Dennis. What about the open space? What about the open space? Is it going to take all the open space away?
Well, it's not going to take it away. It's going to basically, you have to maintain it in the first place. It might impact it just a little bit on weekends. But during the rest of the time, it isn't going to be a problem. If we get our occupancy at current levels, if we can keep them at current levels, this is going to generate has a potential to generate approximately $30,000 of direct revenue, not to mention indirect revenue to all the businesses in Watertown.
What about the issue of it being too close to the Veterans Memorial?
Well, I think that was addressed by the veterans, and they came up in the paper. Dick Strickers wrote a letter that they were had no opinion one way or the other, and they knew that campground proposal was in the works before they ever turned a shovel on it. I guess that's about it. It has been looked at quite a bit. I mean, we've discussed all the pros and cons, the reasons we can't do it at Jackson Park. Well, you have all your infrastructure sitting there in the park. It's ready to go. And
what about the fact that Wing Fling is out there in the summertime? What's going to happen with that now?
Well, we can close any portion of the park we deem necessary for extraordinary events that require more room. And one other thing I'd like to mention is the fact that through the generosity of Mike and Conda Williams and Gary Liebel, who allowed us this expansion, we are not guaranteed to get their permission again. This is, as far as I know, a one-time deal. It's possible we could get it again, but it's also possible we can't. And I'd just like to go with the known, basically. Is there any questions?
Yeah, I got a question. Jackson Park has not been fully used for picnicking yet anyway, has it? There's lots of room for expansion there as far as just picnicking.
That's correct. There's plenty of room at Jackson Park and
a lot of greenway.
Plenty of green.
Yeah, okay.
Is there a pavilion supposed to be built out there?
There's a possibility of a pavilion being built. The Lidner family is trying to raise $50,000. And if they get their $50,000, from what I understand, Roger might correct me if I'm wrong, but if they can get $50,000, then the Parks Board would look at adding to it and actually building a pavilion there.
Isn't that in the '09 CIP budget, correct?
Yes.
Is there space for both of them?
Yes.
Campground
Yes.
and pavilion?
Yes.
Where are you gonna put all the cars when?
If we
Parking.
need to, we can put them across the street. We don't want the campground full of cars in a deal like the Wing Fling, or when you've got, say, 200 or 300 cars, like at the Brown County Fair, they had a deluge. They got 2 inches of rain, now they got a mess. The last thing we want to do is create a mess on the other side of it, or in that part of the park when there's adequate parking across the street. And as far as the expansion across the street, that was, well, you don't want a busy road like South Lake Drive running through the campground. It becomes a safety issue with children going back and forth. And besides that, I believe FEMA paid for part of it. I'm not sure all the hoops we'd have to jump through in order to get it. And I would never vote for something with a road going through the middle of a park.
George, you had some questions?
Yeah, well, I just have another comment. Roger mentioned that he had 7 phone calls, I believe. And I'm sorry I didn't keep an exact count, but I talked to roughly 30-some people, 4 of which were campers. The rest were mostly, I'd say most of the people that I talked to, either by phone call or in person, were against putting the campground there. So just, I have no idea what the rest of the council, how they came out talking to people.
I probably had probably about the same amount of calls as the rest of you. I think the same people probably called all of us, and to be perfectly honest, it was about a 50-50 toss-up. Most of the people that had a problem with it had a problem with the green area. And, you know, when you think about it, we're not moving the lake, we're not moving the green area. There's just once in a while, there's going to be some more campers out there. One lady said to me they enjoy going out to the park for picnicking during the week, but they don't put a blanket down in the grass. They go to one of the campsites that's not being used, picnic on the table, and use the firebox to roast marshmallows. Those things are all going to be there for everybody's use. It's not going to destroy that park at all. I think of, you know, several years ago when a council sat here struggling with the idea, should we sell that north end? Well, now we have Paradise Drive all developed, Louise Avenue all developed. We can't see the lake from Highway 20 anymore. That did make a difference to the lake. This is not going to make any kind of a difference to the lake as far as enjoying that park. And I think somebody said something about no more parks coming into town. Anytime there's a development, there has to be a park. 5% of their land has to be given to the park board. So we are getting more parks. Just as long as we keep getting developments, we'll keep getting more parks in town. The lake is it is a special park out there. It's always been very sacred to the town of Watertown, but I think we need to share that. The people that come in from out of town, I think we're always prudent of our tax dollars. Sales tax dollars are generated many times over by those folks that come in. When they're here, they don't just stay out at the lake and sit there. They're shopping, they're buying gas, they're eating in restaurants, they're doing all sorts of things in the community that we want people from out of town to enjoy here in Watertown. I agree with Dennis, even approving this tonight, we still have all during the winter months. If anybody has any real burning desire to stop that action, it certainly can happen. So I think we should approve it tonight and let it move forward, and then if there's some reason why we really, really can't, I'm just not quite sure of the whole thing about destroying the view of the lake or the greenway. It doesn't make sense.
Thank you. Anyone else wish to speak to the issue?
I have a comment I'd like
Yes.
to make. I went out there the other day, and Park and Rec had staked it out. And I went out and happened to be another council person out there, and we walked the whole area. And in my estimation, they're gonna use like a fourth of that area to the east. Is that correct? They're gonna leave a ton of property to the lakeside. The campers are gonna be kind of on the east end, am I right?
Let Roger take over. Thank you.
Well, it's hard to describe it, but if the expansion would be north of the residential area between South Lake Drive and the main picnic parking lot. And I don't know in terms of 25% of the entire area or 30% or what the percentage would be, but that's why we staked the north boundary, just because one of the concerns was its proximity to the Veterans Memorial. So we wanted to give you a feel for where that line would be.
When I went out there, Roger, I understood it a lot more than sitting in my living room trying to visualize it. And you had it staked out, and I don't see a problem at all. In fact, I think it'd be a big plus for the city.
Your Honor.
Yes.
I'd just like to point out that I've had discussion with 3 of the Parks Board members who have assured me that they will do everything possible. The entrance road into the extended park ground area will be moved closer to the house, and the entire campground, extended campground, will be moved as close to South Lake Drive as possible to give as much parkland between the campground and the lake as possible.
Thank you. So noted.
One other thing. I've been in various discussions regarding that location versus others. There's been general agreement just about regarding across the street. Nobody wants those kids running across South Lake Drive to the lake. It's just too dangerous. The alternative with Jackson Park has been discussed, and it's perhaps is not a dead issue at this point. I don't know if the Parks Board is aware of it. The sludge pond is out of use now, and you take that acreage for that area to Jackson Park, you have a tremendous place for a campground. However, that didn't move many people. So consequently, we've got to hit some balance here between those who are for the extended campground and those opposed. I had 27 phone calls. The vast majority were either in support of or didn't care. And they were all from Ward E.
You're a popular guy, Gordy.
Too popular as far as I went.
Okay.
Question.
Yes, Alderman Meisenheimer.
The land across the road, I think, at the last meeting, we kind of set that aside, that there's nothing that can be put on that. Also, I'd like to direct this to Roger. The revenue coming from that campsite, how does that fit versus the expenditures? We all know that the county had problems with their campsite at Memorial Park. Are we going to end up in the same boat that we're going to have to put money into it to keep it going?
Well, the current campground of 48 units is not self-supportive. This year through the 9th of September, we've generated about $60,000 in campground fees. The problem is the budget at City Park runs the entire park, not just the campground. It also runs Jackson Park, Forestburg Park, and some of the bike trail. So it's hard to say if the city park budget's $85,000, how much of it's spent just maintaining the campground. I can tell you the utilities that are spent in the comfort station in the campground and the utilities for the electric in the campground. But the manpower is maintaining the boat ramp, the picnic area, the Veterans Memorial. They're maintaining the boat ramp at Jackson Park and bike trails and all those things. I can just tell you that, compared to our other parks, camping does generate some revenue. I won't try and tell you that it'll be self-supporting. And there will be additional expenses with an expanded campground. Just the additional restroom facility will take utilities. The area being mowed is already being mowed. However, somebody has to clean those restrooms. So, but we, you know, if we maintain the same occupancy rates on the expansion that we have on the current campground, it would generate in the neighborhood of $30,000 a year, which should offset most of the additional costs of that extension.
Thank you, Roger. Any other council members have any comments?
I guess I have one additional comment on what I said earlier about having 6 months to work out the details to this. And if we can't get it worked out in 6 months, we've moved projects into the next year that we haven't been able to settle, and I think that's also an option. I think it's better to keep the money in the budget at this time and try to work it out. If we can't get it worked out, there's a referendum process and different ways of going about this.
Thank you. Alderman?
Just a
Yes.
comment on that. Once we approve this budget, it goes into the Park and Recreation budget. Once it's into the Park and Recreation budget, the city council, in effect, has nothing else to say about it. So if you don't approve, you either approve it or don't approve it now, and the city and the park department does with it what they want.
I believe, George, that they could, any residents or constituents can bring up a referendum and go to the vote of the people, so it isn't a done deal just because it's in the budget.
Stan, clarification on that particular point.
Which point, Mayor?
What Alderman Solberg said, is that correct?
I believe that, I believe that the constituents could circulate petitions and invoke a referendum.
Very good, thank you. Anyone else have anything to say?
If space is an issue, would there be a possibility of reducing the number of campsites? Would that be more palatable to the council and maybe the folks in Watertown? Roger, can you speak to that?
Well, there is no magic number. I mean, the proposal was between 23 and 25. I think that was primarily arrived at because it fit the site that we felt was reasonable to use for that purpose. As you lessen the number of pads, of course, you lessen the revenue potential, and most of your expenses in terms of the second phase, which is the comfort station, remain the same, whether there's 23 or 19. And so, again, there are certain administrative rules state of South Dakota invoke in terms of how many square feet have to be at each campsite, density of pads per acre, that kind of thing. But it could be downsized to any number of pads. It's just the economics of it become, less positive.
Thank you, Rick.
So if we downsize, say, to 15, then 15 or half of what you're planning, then the income on that would be approximately $15,000.
Right. And, it'd be more difficult to justify the expenditure for 15 as opposed to 25.
But if you put the comfort station in, then if we wanted to expand to the 28, that would easily be done with very little expense, except for the pads.
If the comfort station was designed for a 25-unit campground, there are some specific requirements on the number of fixtures based on the number of pads in a campground. So it would have to be sized for the ultimate expansion size.
Your Honor, I'd like to touch on what George touched on a bit. We are thinking too much about what we as a council can do with the funding once it goes to the Parks Board. This was designed years ago when the Park Board and the Rec Board were consolidated in one to remove it from any politics of the city. And therefore, what we need to do is either fund the project or don't fund the project, but to tell the audience that we can do something about it later is just not possible.
Thank you. Yes, one more. Go ahead.
Question of clarification that related to what Dennis Solberg raised, and that was the issue of referendum. Wouldn't that require Stanton referring the whole budget that the city is approving?
I think that they could pick out an individual portion of the ordinance and refer a specific line item to a vote. I confess I've never heard of that being done, but if they want to take they could either refer the entire ordinance, or perhaps they could refer the council's action on the amendment to the ordinance. I've never seen it done. I've never heard of it done, but I wonder if they could circulate petitions asking the voters whether or not they want to overturn the council's, let's say hypothetically George's motion fails tonight, and the ordinance is approved as presented and when it was first brought up at second reading. I'm wondering, are you listening to me?
Yes, I am.
Oh, okay. I wasn't certain if you had a question, but I think that they could potentially circulate a petition and try to invoke a referendum on the defeat of the attempted ordinance amendment. But again, I've never read about it, never seen it happening, but it certainly, petitions probably could be presented, and we'd have to answer the question, is that action referable?
Thank you, Stanton.
I think we beat this to death. I'm going to move the question.
Very good. We've had a motion and a second to move the capital improvement project for the camp pad expansion from the 07-08 budget to the 2010-2011. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call, please.
Okay.
Now, this is to move the question, not on the issue of the amendment.
No, it's the amendment,
Voting on the amendment.
According to Robert's Rules of Order, you have to vote on
You should have.
the deal first.
You should have voted. You should have
Stanton?
voted. You should have called for a vote, Mayor, on George's motion to call the question.
Oh, is that how that, okay. Can we
I
redo
don't-
this then?
I don't believe there was a second on that. At least I didn't hear it.
Was there a second?
I will second that.
You will second it. So now we take a vote
On whether to call the question.
on call the question. Okay, all those in favor of calling the question, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Now we'll vote on the amendment to move the capital improvement project for the campground expansion from 07-08 to 2010-2011. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? No. Roll call on the vote, please, Tracy.
Okay, on the motion to approve the amendment, begin with Mrs. Arbogast,
No.
Mr. Garnos,
No.
Mr. Gisselbeck,
No.
Mr. Heller,
Yes.
Mr. Meisenheimer,
Yes.
Mr. Solberg, Mr. Solom, Mr. Wilkins, and Mrs. York.
No.
I count 3 votes in favor and 6 opposed.
It was defeated. Next, we have a motion and a second to approve the motion to approve the budget for 07-08. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Aye. Let the record state that the one lone casting vote for no was Alderman George Heller. All the rest were in favor. Moving on to item number 6, which is first reading of ordinance number 07-27, the rezoning of lot 16, block 2, Westview 5th edition, from R2 Single Family Attached District to an R3 Multifamily Residential District. If there's any questions, Rick, you would be here to answer them. So.
Yeah, just to provide an illustration of the location of the property that's in question here. The filtration plant here in town is located in the upper left-hand corner of the drawing. Your petitioner and applicant is Steve Horning, who owns the property, Westview 5th Edition. The site that's being suggested for rezoning from R2 to R3 is located in the red. And again, reading of the ordinance number 0727, an ordinance amending the zoning district boundaries by rezoning that lot 16, block 2, which that will be as legal description upon replat, of Westview 5th Edition from R2 Single Family Attached District to R3 Multifamily Residential District.
Thank you, Rick. Are there any questions? If not, we'll be taking this up at the next meeting, Rick? Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you. Item number 7 is the requirements for the construction site runoff erosion and sediment control. Again, first reading of ordinance number 07-30. Any questions? We'll direct them to Rick.
Okay, I'll just, the title of this and his ordinance number again, Mayor, you already said this, but it's ordinance 07-30. And this ordinance is an ordinance amending Title 23 Stormwater and providing for requirements for construction site runoff erosion and sediment control. We discussed it. It's at pretty good length. That's at the September 11th meeting. We provided everyone a full copy of the proposed ordinance. I will remind you that this ordinance is intended to implement the requirements of our erosion and sediment control best management practice manual that is available online on the Planning and Zoning webpage. Any questions?
If there's no questions for Rick, why, thank you very much, Rick. Item number 8 is the authorization for the mayor to sign addendum number 1 to the financial assistance agreement number 712845 for the airport project number AIP 3-46-0058-17-2005 with the South Dakota Department of Transportation. Tracy.
Thank you. This amendment would allow the state to pay the city an additional whopping $46.44 for improvements that have been completed at the airport. The FAA has already approved an amendment to their portion of the project, which provides an additional $2,206. So this is really just some housekeeping to from the state standpoint, authorize them to fulfill their 2% obligation on the project.
Is there a motion then for authorizing myself to? Okay, a motion by Alderman Giselbeck. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderman Meisenheimer. Any questions? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Item number 9 has been pulled. That was the authorization for the mayor to sign an agreement for towing services for a 3-year term. That's been pulled to a later date. Next, we'll move on to the open, and there was a handout. I'd like to refer you to that. The first item on the open is we'll have a FEMA presentation on the National Flood Insurance Program, construction requirements and flood insurance. And Rick, would you like to introduce our guests?
Yes, Mayor, it'd be my pleasure. We have with us this evening Mary Jo Kamrud with FEMA Region 8, and we also have with us Michelle Saxman. She is our state contact and coordinator of the National Flood Insurance Program at the state level. They're here to talk to us probably fairly timely, as you probably recall. We took an action, we the council as a community took an action on adopting a new flood damage prevention ordinance, adopting a new floodplain that we've been talking about since 1999, if you can believe that. It is effective, September 14th or 15th, one of those 2 days. It has become effective. We have a new map and a new ordinance regulating the Big Sioux River, Roby Creek, Lake Compesca, and Lake Pelican. As of September 28th, we have been notified that in fact those maps will become effective from the National Flood Insurance Program's perspective in terms of establishing rates and for making floodplain determinations, is the structure in or out. And I'm happy to have both Mary Jo and Michelle here to discuss with us a little bit about flood risk and a lot about the National Flood Insurance Program. Thank you.
Good evening, and thank you for having me available to speak with you. We'll just go to that. I'd like to speak with you a little bit about the National Flood Insurance Program and the fact that you have a flood insurance rate map going effective at the end of the month on the 28th of September. So I wanted to visit with you about what the impact of that map is and what the benefits of the flood insurance rate map is for you. Flood insurance facts. Anybody can flood. Whether you're inside a FEMA-defined floodplain or outside a FEMA-defined floodplain, you could flood. Anyone in the city of Watertown can purchase flood insurance. That would include renters, homeowners, landlords, businesses, commercial property owners, non-for-profits. Anyone can purchase flood insurance in a participating community, and the city of Watertown is a participating community in the flood insurance program. Types of coverage include contents, structure, contents and structure, or one or the other. Homeowners and renters insurance does not cover flood insurance at all. So if you have damages due to a flood, your homeowners will not be able to assist you. Sources of floods: rivers, creeks, and streams, which typically was what FEMA maps can cause flooding, but there are lots of other sources of flooding that flood insurance will cover. Ice jams, snowmelt, lake or reservoir flooding, reservoir discharges, above ground or buried pipeline failures, intense storms resulting in urban flooding, ponding, shallow flooding, or flash floods, levee, dam, canal, or railroad failure and or overtopping, alluvial fans, mudslides. As long as the water runs across the land and into the structure and you carry flood insurance, you are covered by flood insurance. Groundwater seepage, sewage backup, and land subsidence is not covered by flood insurance unless it's directly attributed to the flooding. The insurance adjuster would make that determination based on the actual events of what's happened. So, now that you've heard the sources of flooding, you need to consider, are you at risk? And if you are at risk, you can buy flood insurance. Mandatory flood insurance purchase requirements. This is relevant because you have a new map from FEMA going effective on the 28th of September. If you have a federally regulated loan that is made, increased, extended, renewed, refinanced on a structure in the FEMA-defined floodplain with flood zone designations of A or AE, then flood insurance is mandatory for the life of the loan. Mandatory requirements for flood insurance applies to the structure only. The contents is optional for that property owner. For flood insurance calculations and determination of rates, the first thing that's examined is whether a structure is pre-firm or post-firm. A pre-firm structure is one that was built in the city of Watertown or substantially improved before July 4th, 1989. A pre-firm structure before July 4th, 1989. The post-firm structure would be defined as one that was built or substantially improved after July 4th, 1989, or a structure that was originally in the county and annexed into the land. And that date for the annexed structure would be February 1st, 1986. Grandfathering. That's what I really want to speak with you about, aside from you might be at risk and anybody can buy flood insurance. Grandfathering is the opportunity for structures that are outside right now, outside the FEMA-defined floodplain, that will be brought into the FEMA-defined floodplain as of September 28th, 2007. So if you're out and you're coming in to the FEMA-defined floodplain, you want to look at grandfathering your insurance premium because it will be at a reduced rate. Even though you have the same amount of coverage, you will pay a lower premium. You must have that policy effective prior to September 28th, 2007 to qualify for the reduced rates, the grandfathered rates. The structure remains eligible for reduced flood insurance rates as long as the insurance's coverage is continuous, even between property owners. The reduced premium may be transferred at the time of closing from one property owner to the next. The reduced premium remains in effect even if a flood claim is made, even if numerous flood claims are made. As long as the insurance is continuous from this date forward, you can maintain that lower premium. The grandfather rate that I'm referring to, and I'll show you an example in a minute, is referring to premiums that are based on a flood hazard risk zone of B, C, or X, which you'll see on the flood insurance rate maps. This is for example purposes only, just to give you an idea of what the flood insurance rates could look like for this particular example, which is very specific, that makes the assumption that it is a pre-firm structure built before July 4th, 1989, that the replacement cost of the structure, to rebuild that structure, not the current value, but the future forecast value of $100,000 for the structure, and the contents is $40,000 in coverage, and there's a $500 deductible applied to the structure and a $500 deductible applied to the contents. This is an example of some of the variations in the premiums. Most residences in this area have a basement, so you can see the difference in the grandfathered rates. The B, C, or X with basement would be $900 if you grandfather in right now. If your structure is going to be in the floodplain then the rate could rise for this particular example from $900 to $1,100. This is another example for post-firm construction, and I'll just say that post-firm construction is built after July 4th, 1989. It's a similar example, and it shows you the differences in premiums, but most of the structures that the current map is going to impact, or the new map is going to impact, is pre-firm. So I'll just let you look at that example and we'll move on from there. Replacement cost value. When you go to insure your structure in the flood insurance program, please understand the difference between these two terms that I'm about to discuss. Replacement cost value coverage is a single family dwelling and a residential condo unit only. That's the only one that it can apply to. It must be the principal residence. In other words, that you must reside in that structure 80% of the year. The structure is insured for at least 80% of the structure's replacement cost at the time of loss. Not the current value, but what it would cost to rebuild it at the time of the event. If it's not insured to that value, then it would be actual cash value, which is a depreciation applied to the policy. Actual cash value is the cost to repair or replace an insured item at the time of loss, less physical depreciation. Physical depreciation is based on age, condition, and life expectancy of the item at the time of loss. Contents coverage is always actual cash value. It is always depreciated. Structure can be replacement cost. Contents is always actual cash value, always depreciated. Let me give you an example of the impact that the difference in the policies can have upon your event that you might experience. If we take a structure value or a structure policy of $107,000, an event occurs and the estimated cost of the replacement of that structure is $130,000. 80% of $130,000 is $104,000. So you can see right there that the policy is within the 80% range because the minimum threshold is 104 and the policy is insured at 107. As an example, you have an event that occurs and the estimated damages are $90,000. The claim would pay up to $90,000 less the deductible because you have replacement cost value policy. If your structure, the same structure, is a total loss, the claim will pay up to, but not to exceed, the policy limit of $107,000. And the importance of this example is demonstrated by the actual cost value. The structure policy, instead of being $107,000, is now $95,000. It might represent what your mortgage might be for the structure. The estimated replacement cost at the time of loss is again the same price of $130,000, and 80% of $130,000 is $104,000. Because this policy is only insured to $95,000, it's indicating that it doesn't qualify for the replacement cost. So, as an example, if an estimated damage following an event occurs and it's valued for your damages are valued at $75,000, the check that you receive will be $75,000 minus the depreciation of each of those items that was damaged. So you will not be getting $75,000. You will be getting something less, and it could be significantly less depending on the condition of the items that were damaged. If your estimated damages were to be $102,000, and remember your policy is still valued at $95,000, as you see at the top of the page, the claim would pay no more than $95,000 less the depreciated value of the items damaged. So you can see there's a pretty big difference in what you would come out following an event. So let's look at that real quick again. If you were to have $90,000 on a replacement cost value structure, you had $90,000 in damage, FEMA would pay, or your flood insurance would pay, up to $90,000 less the deductible. If you have an actual cost value policy, you choose not to insure to the replacement, and you had an event that was $75,000, it would be $75,000 less the deductible and less the depreciation. So there's a big difference. It's a big difference, and folks should be aware of what that difference is when they decide how they want to value their policy. Flood insurance is not a valued policy, meaning that it will not pay more than the value of the policy in the event of a flood or damage. Flood insurance pays the replacement cost or the actual cost up to the policy limit, and that's really what you need to know. We will not pay more than the policy limit, whereas a valued policy and a guaranteed replacement cost policy, both are options in your homeowners. They can actually pay more than your policy. Flood insurance will never pay more than your flood policy coverage. Let's talk about some of the examples of flood insurance coverage. Structure and or contents coverage, deductible applies to each type of coverage. So remember, if you have structure coverage, you would have a deductible on that, and you have contents coverage, you would have a deductible on that also. We have limited coverage in basements. Examples of exclusions in the flood insurance program would include decks, landscaping, seasonal, continuous, intermittent, or occasional groundwater, sewage backup, or land subsidence. All of that is not covered. Groundwater infiltration into your structure is not covered. Remember, a flood is running across the land and into the structure. Sewer backup is not covered unless it's directly attributed to a flood event, and that would be determined by your adjuster. Flood insurance does not cover loss of use, no additional living expenses, which would mean temporary housing, food, or transportation. There is no business interruption in flood insurance, and there is no loss of income coverage. If you lose your job as a result of a flood, flood insurance does not cover you for that. So, are you at flood risk? There's a lot of different ways to flood, and if you have flood insurance, you are covered for those damages. Even if you're outside the FEMA-defined floodplain, you can still buy flood insurance, and you would still be covered in the event of a flood. So, if you're more interested in learning about flood insurance, talk to your homeowner's insurance agent, or you can go to the FEMA website, www.floodsmart.gov. You can get a rough idea of a premium estimate, and you can also find an agent that can write a policy in the area. Do you have any questions for me regarding grandfathering the flood insurance program, flood insurance?
I think a lot of people were figuring they'd be grandfathered in at the present rates. Are the rates going to jump now when this floodplain becomes official?
If you are currently in a structure that is outside the FEMA-defined floodplain, and after September 28th you would be in the FEMA-defined floodplain, then you would pay a higher premium because you're at a higher risk, unless you buy flood insurance now, and you would be able to grandfather that reduced rate forever, as long as that policy remained continuous.
I guess this is probably kind of a personal question in a way. I have a property that is in the floodplain or the floodway. Now, is my insurance going to stay the same, or is it going to raise?
Your insurance will remain the same because you're already in the FEMA-defined floodplain. Your premium might change because as a result of my talk, you might say, well, I'm at a higher risk than I realized and I want to increase my policy coverage, in which case your premium would raise. But if you remain the same from now until the 1st of October, there will be no change in your insurance premium rates. If you're in, there's no change. If you're out and going in, you want to try and grandfather. Take advantage of this opportunity to grandfather in at the reduced rate, because it stays the same as long as you maintain continuous coverage. You can still make claims. You still have the same amount of coverage as you in the FEMA-defined floodplain, but you pay a lower premium for that. So take advantage of this and buy flood insurance.
Is there anyone in the audience that would like to ask any questions in regards to this? Any council members have any questions?
I've got one question, it might be a little different, but in the late spring, we have the water that normally comes up in Lake Kempesca, and we have a floating piece of ice out there. And if the water comes up high enough and the wind takes the ice into a structure, is flood insurance cover that?
So the water came across the land and into your structure?
It's water in a different form.
You know, I always get stumped by these really clever questions. I believe it would because it's essentially water running across the land and into the structure.
That's a good one, Dennis.
Yeah, now I'm going to have to look that one up.
Yeah.
I've not had that particular question expressed in that way.
We have had some damage out in Lake Kempesca from ice when the water has been up high.
Mhm.
And I was just curious, because there are some structures that are pretty low, including one that I have, and you always worry about those things.
So as long as the water runs across the land and into the structure, and there's some express policy conditions that have to be met, and we have literature to distribute, or it's available on the FEMA website, but in order to make a claim, you would have to have 2 acres or 2 properties impacted by floodwaters. Those properties impacted don't have to carry flood insurance. It could be yours and somebody else's, and that somebody else might not carry flood insurance, and it would still be covered, as long as a claim can be made if there's 2 acres or 2 properties impacted. So that clear, but that's getting into more specific policy details that you would go over with your flood insurance agent, and they'd answer. FEMA does produce on their website a summary of coverage. It's 4 pages long. If you go to the FEMA website and you type in the search engine summary of coverage, you'll get a response on that, and it's 4 pages long. It's a lovely little explanation of the program, what's covered, what's not, gives you some good basic information. And if you're interested in learning a little bit more without doing a lot of work, that would be the place to start. Okay?
Yes, go right ahead. Yes, please do.
It's for you.
Okay.
Okay, Doug Modica, Watertown resident. I live on Kempesca, and there is a FEMA form called MTEZ, and I have questions about it. It's extremely difficult to fill out. The purpose of it, the reason I'm trying to fill this out, is because if I sell my house, the mortgage lender could require flood insurance. Okay? And so I want to file this with my title, with my deed. I want to get an affidavit addendum to my title. Should I die, and so that even if the estate sells, it's on record that I am in Zone A. And so I've been trying to get this MTEZ form filled out, and I need to find out what I have to do to get it notarized, or an affidavit, or what is it going to take to get this attached to my title, so that when I sell my house, if the mortgage company says you've got to get flood insurance, I say no, it's a legal record that I am in Zone A. What do I do?
Can you answer that?
I can answer some of it, but some of it might be some local requirements that I can't address. The LOMA that you're referring to, the letter of map amendment, when FEMA produces the map, they're produced at a scale that we can't define every structure, and every structure is unique. So if you believe that your structure is inappropriately shown in the FEMA defined floodplain, you can petition FEMA with more specific information on the elevation and the location of that structure to see if you can't be removed from the mandatory designation or mandatory requirement of flood insurance. And you still can't buy flood insurance, and you still might flood. You might get out by the hair of your chinny chin chin, but you might still flood. Okay, so you petition FEMA with that information. You have the form. There's also instructions that go with it that can help you with that. You submit that to FEMA. FEMA returns a determination that says you've been successfully removed, and therefore you don't have to carry the mandatory flood insurance, or you have not been removed. That is a public record that is available on our website. You can look that up on the FEMA website to see that particular letter of map amendment. And it is only effective for that map. So let's say in 5 years, we remap and the base flood elevation changes. That letter of map amendment would be reevaluated to determine if it's still effective, whether it's still representative. We do that though, it's done automatically. So that's a matter of public record. To have it attached to the title is a matter for your local officials to address. But you do want to be sure that it's made available to your future buyer.
That's how I can assure it. By putting
Yes.
it in the title.
Yeah.
Well, that again, how, you know, it could be just something that you keep with your title. But how you attach it at a local level, we don't get involved with.
What about the bigger question of having some help in filling out the form? Who would he go to?
Well, there are instructions that are on it that come with it. Did you get those?
Yes, I have 21 pages. MT1. There's also an MT1 form.
Yes, sir. All right. So let me ask. Yeah, you might have to hire a surveyor or a professional engineer, and they should be able to fill out most of that information for you. They have not. Yes, we'll have to.
Okay,
discuss
very
it a
good.
bit.
You guys will get together after. Okay, then there's one more question. Bob, would you like to step up, please? And Bob, I don't mean to interrupt, but you want to come up to the mic? That way everybody can hear us at home.
You stated that you automatically review these previously submitted letter of map amendments? Because there are a lot of people who have submitted these before.
Yes.
And now they say that they're good up to the time that the new maps are adapted.
Yes.
Okay.
They will be, as of September 28th, there is a document that FEMA produced, and it's called the Summary of Actions. And we review all the previously submitted letters of map amendment, letters of map revision based on fill, and letters of map revision. And we review those to determine if they're still effective or whether they've been rescinded.
Okay. In other words, I want to know action and automatically be done. When will that be done? Next month or?
Is it out? Have you seen it?
I've seen the preliminary one, but it comes out official October 1st.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Bob. Any other questions? Yes, Mike. You'll need to step up to the mic, please. And
I'm Mike Davis. My question is this. When you review this, does that change the floodplain for everybody that's in it?
When we review
When you review this map deal? Like on September
Lomas?
28th? Yeah. You was talking about sediment and changes in the topography is the way I understood it. Does that change the map? If I got a 5-foot culvert coming into my neighborhood with more water, am I in a different flood zone then than I am now before they get this 5-foot culvert dumping into my property?
If you have a culvert that was built or replaced after FEMA has mapped the area, then that information is supposed to be submitted to FEMA so that we know about it and we can determine if it has an impact. And the community actually has a responsibility to inform us of that action for a culvert. For a man-made structure such as that, a bridge would also be included. If it's outside a FEMA mapped area, then the community might choose to administer to a higher level and require information from that developer or from that agency that's doing the work.
Does that change the level for all?
Only if we've restudied it and for some reason that information, if that information was made available to us and it was that part of the area that we've restudied on the map. Not all of the map that FEMA is producing for the community, we have not restudied all of the area. Some of it is just being reproduced. And then there are some areas that we have restudied. So if you have a culvert that has been installed upstream of your property, we may or may not have a record of it, and you might want to consider yourself at higher risk and buy flood insurance to protect yourself, even if you're not in a FEMA-defined floodplain. Does that answer your question? No? I can
Well,
talk
Mike,
with you afterwards.
yeah, that'd be fine.
Yeah.
Yeah, they'll talk with you afterwards, Mike, so thank you very much. Anyone else? If not, ladies, thank you both very much, and we all have a lot of questions, I'm sure. Thank you. Moving on to agenda item number 2 on the open agenda items is the authorization to submit a grant application to the South Dakota Department of Transportation for road improvements in the Pheasant Ridge Industrial Park. The Watertown Development Company informed me that there are grant funds available through the South Dakota Department of Transportation, and that's to fund a portion of road construction within Pheasant Ridge Industrial Park. The development company has asked the city to submit this application to enhance the value of the industrial park and increase the opportunity for additional economic development prospects. So tonight, I'm requesting your authority to submit this grant application in the name of the city of Watertown. Mark Rodvold from Focus Watertown, who's the Director of Business Development with Watertown Development Company, is here tonight if anyone has specific questions. So I asked if there could be a motion to allow that to happen, please.
So moved.
So moved by Alderman Garnos. Is there a second? Seconded by Alderwoman Arbogast. Any questions for Mark? If not, all in favor say aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you, Mark. Good job. Moving on, are there any other items that come before the open?
I don't know where this belongs, Mr. Mayor, but there was a memo on our desk as we came in tonight. In the first paragraph, and I'm going to quote this, notice of the meeting was given to the committee/council members, unquote. And I assume that's a matter of semantics, but I'd like the minutes to reflect that the council members, other than the committee, were not notified of that meeting.
I have no clue what that's about,
Stan.
Stan.
I'll try, Mayor. The memo that was laid in front of you is the memo that Cottington County State's Attorney Don Elsher sent to the Open Records Commission in Pierre. It's her memorandum, which was just basically an introductory 2-page cover memorandum that also had attachments to it, which included my request to the Attorney General for an official opinion and Mark Roby's or someone's complaint form. And so that's simply Dawn's cover memo to the Open Records Commission saying, here's the issue as we know it, and here are the attachments that back up the reason that I'm forwarding it on to you folks. But George, perhaps you're right. Maybe in her recitation of the facts, there's some semantic errors, but I think there's enough supporting documentation that it's going to be clear.
Very good.
I
Yes.
did not get a copy.
I made 11 and placed them around there, so maybe they've gotten mixed up.
No, I didn't. No, I did not. Any other open items?
Mr. Mayor?
Yes.
Just to remind the council and the members of the community that our inaugural meeting for the government study is Tuesday night at 7 o'clock here in the City Hall.
Next week.
Oh, okay. That's right.
Very good. Okay. Okay, anything else? Yeah.
25th.
Okay. Any other items come before the open? If not, then we'll move on to old business. Any old business to come before the council? Any new business to come before the council? Does any council members have any liaison member reports?
Safety Committee meeting tomorrow morning, 7 a.m.
Any other reports? If not, we will need to go in executive session to discuss some contract negotiations. I anticipate we may be taking action when we come out, so Ken, would you please come back then? And if I could have a motion, please? So moved by Alderman Solberg, seconded by Alderwoman Arbogast to go in executive session. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed? We will go into executive session. Thank you. Seconded by Alderman Solberg to adjourn. All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carried. Thank you all very much.